So the final edition of the Heel to Face podcast for the year 2020. And before we get things started, I just want to get it out there. You know, it is the year 2020, and if you bought somebody a $25 gift card this Christmas for a restaurant, maybe in 1999 that would have been a night out in the town, but I think in the year 2020, a $25 gift card is pretty much a bona fide coupon. Because $25, what's that going to get you at Olive Garden? That's the same as getting someone a buy one meal, get one meal free coupon. I'm just saying. But that's the last we talk about that. We'll talk all about wrestling as we end 2020, hopefully on a high note. The Heel to Face podcast starts right now.
So silence your cell phones, hold your applause, and tune into the truth.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame in.
From the 315 to the world, this is the Heel to Face podcast.
The cream of the crop! Wow, man, freaked out!
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Heel to the Face.
I said, are you ready?
From Armory Square in downtown Syracuse, New York, let's send it now to Brandon and Jared.
Bad luck to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddy from Syracuse.
So the final edition of the Heel to the Face podcast for 2020, Brandon Clements, myself, Jared Wicks. Follow the show at Heel to the Face. Make sure you do that into the new year to get all our new episodes. Subscribe and get notified. Follow us on Twitter at Heel to the Face. As we're doing this on a Saturday morning, right after Smackdown aired on Friday night. We're coming off TLC this past weekend, and being our last show of the year, next time we'll be on the air. There'll already been Wrestle Kingdom, Raw Legends Night, and hopefully something more. But we'll start right there with Smackdown on Christmas night. It was taped on Tuesday. Unfortunately, I knew a little bit of what's going on because, and I think that this was wrong, but some people put out there, spoiler alert, major title change on SmackDown. Now, you could have just put, on these wrestling sites I follow, I don't want to know the spoilers. You just put SmackDown results, spoiler alert. You don't put major title change, and the reason why you don't do that is because if a title change stands, and you're heading into the main event like we did last night where there was only one title match left, you knew which title was changing hands. Yes, at the start of the show, I didn't know which one. It could have been the world title. It could have been the tag team titles for the women. But heading into the final match with only one title on the line, knowing that one title did change hands, I did obviously see what was happening. But either way, if you didn't know what was happening or you did, I think it was the best SmackDown of the year. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the Raw ratings and the slumping of Raw ratings. Because a lot of people have said, what would maybe make the Raw ratings a little bit better is to have a 2-hour program instead of a 3-hour program. And SmackDown last night showed exactly that. There was no wasted segments, and I think it was the perfect program. And I told this to Brandon before we started. I watched it with people who don't like wrestling. That's my favorite new Christmas tradition, whether it was the Raw a couple years ago that was live on Christmas or this SmackDown. It's putting on wrestling in front of people who don't normally watch it. Now, the Raw a couple years ago, pretty slow. And by the time Dean Ambrose, I think, won the Intercontinental title to main event that Raw, it was like 11:15. But this SmackDown, this could have been live, and I'm kind of wondering if we weren't in the year we were, if they wouldn't have made this a live SmackDown in front of people. But what made it a good SmackDown was the fact that, it was I guess if you wanted to have a commercial for people who don't watch wrestling, it hit all the marks. You start off with the championship match right away, and the reason they did that was perfect because, you got the football game beforehand, which USA didn't have that on the live Christmas episode of Monday Night Raw. SmackDown had it right out of the park. They have a football game right before this. You have the lead-in with the two main stars, or at least the main star in the company, Roman Reigns, kicking things off in a steel cage match for the championship. You don't really have any wasted segments. Jey Uso put on a good match in the middle, and then you end things off with a championship changing hands, a heel losing to a face in dramatic fashion with all the wrestlers out there. Brandon, I know you like this SmackDown. What are some highlights that you saw?
Yeah, man, just to follow up with what you're saying with SmackDown this week, it was from start to finish, great programming. Again, I have to agree with your sentiments. It is a perfect promo or some sort of advertising moment for non-wrestling fans. So it was, Roman Reigns, Kevin Owens, they blew the roof off. That was one of the best matches I've seen on SmackDown this year. Not to be outdone was the Intercontinental title match. Sami Zayn and Big E, they had put on a good show as well. And it was so good to see Big E getting the chance to have a nice major singles run that he hasn't had in a while. We know he had a ton of run years back, but they forgot to talk about that on the show last night. This is like his first big run. Here's the thing. He was a champion before. He's been a multi-time champion. In the tag team side, yes. He's also been an Intercontinental champion before as well, if I'm not mistaken. So I have to say this. My highlight of the night, and you know this because I'm not a fan of him. He's good in the ring. I just don't like him. Sami Zayn, I'm so glad he's not the champion anymore. It was time. It was, you could just tell that, they were setting up for a Big E victory. I didn't see the spoilers. I try to stay away from the spoilers. I stay off the Twitter. I stay off the Facebook and all the websites, and we use a lot of the same websites ourselves, amongst ourselves. I stayed away from it because I knew it was taped early, so I didn't want to know anything. So I kind of stayed off. Anything that was WWE related, I just stayed away. And for me, not seeing any spoilers or anything made the night that much better. It was WWE's great. That was a great way for WWE to finish off 2020 as we head into 2021, and Royal Rumble WrestleMania season is upon us.
One thing I noticed about the show, and this goes to watching the show with people who don't normally watch wrestling. Brandon, you could probably attest to this. First off, non-wrestling fans obviously don't watch the pay-per-views. The only time that they watch wrestling is if it's on television in front of them. And what is the main calling card of Raw, SmackDown, any of these shows is that they're really just promos for the pay-per-views a lot of times. Yeah. And for people who don't watch wrestling, what is the one thing you've probably heard since you were a little kid when you put wrestling on in front of somebody? Are these guys going to wrestle or are they just going to talk? And I think last night, SmackDown, WWE knew that fact. They knew that there was going to be a lot of eyeballs on. So any of the talking segments were short. They were backstage. They didn't tease anybody because, again, I'm watching it in front of people who don't normally watch wrestling. I can imagine this happens all over the country, all over the world yesterday. Yep. And, if we had wrestlers come out, just talk in the ring and then leave, people would have been like, I thought they were coming out, because to a non-wrestling fan, anytime you see someone coming out, you think that they're going to wrestle. That's what you think. And then they start to talk, and that's when the whole thing of non-wrestling fans have, like I said this my whole life, of are they just going to talk or are they going to wrestle? And it's like, well, unfortunately, they're promoting for a pay-per-view in 2 weeks, so no, they're not going to wrestle because there's bigger things on the horizon. Well, I'm not paying $50 for a pay-per-view because I've never even watched them wrestle, so why would I do that? And then, like you said, click. But yesterday they didn't do that. The only talking segment in the ring happened right before competitors actually fought. So, and the person I was watching with was, wondering, are these guys going to fight? And I was kind of tipping there when Bianca Belair, Sasha, Charlotte, I didn't know for sure if that was going to be a match. So when they were coming out and talking, I was like, yeah, I think they're going to fight. And then they did actually fight. The tag belts were on the line. It was a good match. Great show for the women's division. So, again, that was like the perfect advertisement for people who don't normally watch wrestling. There's probably a lot of them yesterday who don't normally watch wrestling, just didn't change the channel after the football game ended. And you start right with a match. You end with a match. Any talking segments took place backstage, sure. Anytime anyone's entrance music hit, you knew that they were going to be competing. The Jey Uso thing, Daniel Bryan, was great because it didn't just have that we're going to go to the ring and have a regular wrestling match. Jey Uso comes out and attacks them, so they use the stage elements for a minute to kind of differentiate it from the other matches. But I think, what was there, a total of four matches on the card? You had the Intercontinental, the Women's Tag, the World Title inside a steel cage, which was a great match, by the way. And then you had Jey Uso and Daniel Bryan. So you had four matches pretty much taking up, one of the 30-minute segments each. Overall, I think SmackDown probably was the best SmackDown of the year. And I think now, while I don't want they can't keep this forever. You're not going to have 3 championship matches every single week on television. But I think Raw could take a note from SmackDown of, maybe we need this to be a little more concise. Maybe we need this to be a little bit shorter of a show. And I was never a proponent of Raw moving to 3 hours when it did. I was never a fan of it doing it when it did. And I think right there, SmackDown showed that it shouldn't be.
I'll make 2 final points regarding Christmas Day SmackDown. So to follow up what you're saying, I agree with you 100%. I think the 2-hour versus 3-hour format is the way to go. I think you got to go 2 hours. I don't see it happening because with a 3-hour format, you get more advertising bucks. So from that perspective, we've talked about this since the beginning of our program. I've always talked about the dollars and cents, and that's the reason why you're going to see a 3-hour show for as long as USA will allow it. If the ratings get super, super low, then we might get a 2-hour show again, because maybe they have to renegotiate with USA and WWE. They have to sit down and say, hey, the 3-hour format's not working. We got to go to 2 hours, or you're going to have to leave our network. It could go down like that. We don't know. So I agree with you on that. 2 hours, way better than 3. Now, getting back to SmackDown, two other things I'd like to talk about. The segments were tight, and that's the way it should be. It was like a pay-per-view. It was like this week's SmackDown could have been a pay-per-view. It was probably better than some pay-per-views this year, to be completely honest with you, aside from NXT. I thought it was just a really good program. It's good to see, a good match, start off when you have Kevin Owens and you have the champion Roman Reigns in a steel cage. But here's the nice part. What was leading into it? You had an NFL game that was just finishing up, and it was a halfway decent game. It wasn't like a 41-7 kind of game. So people were still watching towards the end. So you got people on the hook for a little bit, and you just got to reel them in. And what better way to reel them in than you have a major title match with the face of the franchise, so to speak, against another guy who was a hell of a wrestler in Kevin Owens. I think WWE, I got to go. I don't do this often, but bravo to them. SmackDown was absolutely fantastic this week.
Moving over to tables, ladders, and chairs on Sunday night, which would essentially kind of be silly to have such a great SmackDown following a pay-per-view event. But TLC, a good pay-per-view event, led things off with the championship match. You had The Miz cash in Money in the Bank, one of the few people who didn't successfully cash in Money in the Bank, as Drew McIntyre still won the championship belt over The Miz and AJ Styles. You had a pretty good TLC match for the other championship, Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens. But we'll go right to the main event match that had Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt. And I tell you what, I'm not a fan of this. Obviously, I feel like 2020 has been the year of this, and that has been the outrageous. The things that, unfortunately, you can't do in professional wrestling, because unlike other television shows, when someone dies in professional wrestling, they don't really die. No one dies.
No.
It's the whole thing. This is a sport in which you're not killing off the people. In television shows, you can actually kill people off. But in wrestling, you never come out and say you're going to kill anyone off. No one's ever been killed off in wrestling. Even those who retire don't get killed off in their last match. So it's kind of stupid to kill someone when you already know, and the audience already knows, that there's no way that they can die. You're Michael Cole saying, in this match, no one will die, but we will kill someone before the match is over. Well, it's kind of contradictory, and that's what we had with the main event with Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt. I thought it was a great match. I thought it had a good concluding ending with Bray Wyatt being set on fire and losing the match and then kind of collapsing in the ring. And I thought, perfect. That's a great way to end the thing. I think Bray Wyatt did a great job, if that was truly him getting set on fire originally, with the leather jacket and everything. But then you had the element, the Rey Mysterio losing his eye element, the cinematic element of Randy Orton covering him in gasoline, and what I was hoping was going to be somebody breaking it up, because, again, if this was a match that took place in front of people, there would have been some sort of he covers him in gasoline and then someone comes and breaks it up, because they couldn't have filmed it ahead of time. It would have been in the ring in front of people, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, because it was filmed earlier, it wasn't in front of people. It had the cinematic element of him setting Bray Wyatt on fire, a dummy, if you will. And, again, I don't care for that. What do you think about that kind of stuff?
I didn't mind it in this situation. I figure, with the circumstances that we're in, where there's no live audiences, you got the Thunderdome at the Trop, I think it's okay. I mean, you obviously cannot pull this off, efficiently or, make it look really good to a live audience. So I'm okay with it considering the circumstances. I thought it was a decent match. It was a brawl. But I mean, if it was a normal situation where we're not in the middle of a pandemic, I'd give it a thumbs down. But in this case, because of what we're going through with the Thunderdome, I thought it was cool that they were a little more creative with this. I will give the creative team a little bit more credit at WWE for that. So that was cool. And of course, you're not going to burn Randy Orton. So I kind of figured, they were going to do that to Bray Wyatt because he still had his full gear on. So.
Well, they did have Randy Orton come out. He did have the hoodie and the pants and stuff, so it did give like an element that he could be set on fire. And I like the Inferno match. There was no problem with the Inferno match. I like the creativity where it wasn't just in the ring; it was kind of outside the ring, where they had the fire. the whole element of them doing something which you know that they're going to have to go back on. This would be the equivalent of advertising this as a retirement match, but then also advertising, don't forget that Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton will be on Monday Night Raw tomorrow night wrestling. Well, you can't have both. You can't tell me it's going to be one thing, but also another thing. You can't pretty much tell me that no one dies in wrestling, but then also tell me that someone just died in wrestling.
But here's the thing.
I mean,
The thing I will argue.
You can't have both.
There's one thing that I will say to add to that with the whole fire situation. If anybody can, quote unquote, air quotes, die in the in the ring and be reborn, what better character than the Fiend? So for me, it doesn't bother me as much considering obviously what we're in, but because it is the Fiend. The Fiend is, if it was Randy Orton, that tells me, okay, he's probably going to take some time off, or maybe he's going back to the old Randy Orton and getting suspended again or something, but. In this case, I thought it was cool because you can quote unquote kill the Fiend and move on to other things. But also you saw on Monday Night Raw where Alexa Bliss came out, and did her weird thing with the swing set and everything. So this thing's not over by a long shot. A match that I do want to talk about that on TLC that I thought was surprisingly a good match was Carmella and Sasha Banks. I do want to point that out. That was a good title match. Obviously Sasha, she held on to the belt. But Carmella looks good. She's doing some great things in the ring. She looks a lot better. And Sasha Banks is always good in the ring. So that's a match I wanted to bring up because I thought that was a solid match across the board. TLC was good. I enjoyed it. I like the fact that and I had a feeling I feel like this is what's going to happen post TLC. I think there were some seeds kind of planted on Monday Night Raw this past week, but when Morrison cashed in for Miz, it wasn't technically legitimate, and Miz is going to use his USA deal and his lawyers to say, no, actually, I didn't actually hand the briefcase over to the referee, so therefore I am still Mr. Money in the Bank. So I like the way they did that on TLC, where there was no doubt Morrison handed the briefcase to the ref, and Miz was added to the match, and obviously he didn't win. We know that. We know McIntyre won. But I think what's going to happen, you're going to see this in the next couple weeks, that you're going to see Miz. I don't know if he's going to win. I can't project it at this point. I haven't read anything that tells me one way or the other. But you're going to see him do a big stink about it. Maybe he'll do a Miz TV or cut a promo in the back where he says, hey, Morrison did, he gave the ref the briefcase, not me. So I'm waiting to see what happens there. And I do want to give you a little pat on the back because you called it correctly with the women's tag title match. Way to go. Charlotte Flair is back in the business after a layoff, and she's a tag team champion on her first night back. That's typical Charlotte Flair, right?
Yeah. I mean, Charlotte Flair's back. She's a tag team champion again, and she defended the belt at Smackdown this past Friday with Asuka. I'm excited to see her back, especially too, because I feel like Bayley and Sasha kind of been going through the women's division with who they've got, and it's a good women's division, but again, it still could use somebody like a Charlotte Flair. Personally, I can't wait for somebody like Becky Lynch to come back. Ronda Rousey, if she ever comes back, that'll definitely really, I think, kick things up a notch. And heading into Royal Rumble WrestleMania season, I can't, imagine that we don't get either a Becky Lynch or a Ronda Rousey back for next year, because Ronda Rousey's been out for a while now. So I imagine we have to get one of two of those people, and maybe even throw Rhea Ripley back in the main roster mix.
There you go. I was going to say, I feel like there could be a call-up coming soon in the women's NXT women's division. I mean, that division's deep. They're really solid right now. I'll say this again. Raquel Gonzalez to me I think she's going to be the breakout star for 2021. I know she's already, she's been doing well towards the end of 2020, but Raquel Gonzalez, 2021 could be her year where she could tear the roof off. And I want to see it with fans. She's good. She is, she's got a great, look. She's a very imposing figure, and she does some really good things in the ring, and she's gotten better she cut a nice promo the other night. She's really getting it. She's finding her groove, and Raquel Gonzalez could take over the NXT women's division. And then you're going to see somebody like a Rhea Ripley or Io Shirai getting the old call-up. Because guess what? If Raquel keeps going on this path, you can call up Io Shirai or Ripley, or hell, you can call them both up and you still got a really good NXT division down there with Ember Moon. You got Dakota Kai. There's some other wrestlers. Obviously, Miss Gargano. You could obviously put her in there as well. I mean, to me, I think an NXT call-up could be the most likely option, especially with no fans. If there's no fans, you'll get an NXT call-up. If there are going to be fans, I think WWE will do whatever they can to get Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania. That would be me. That'd be my thoughts on it.
I noticed since the promotion of the Royal Rumble, one thing that they've been pretty close-knit on is not announcing anything about it in the sense of advertising where it's going to be and if anyone's going to be there. Most importantly, they don't have to advertise if no one's going to be there. That would just be par for the course. But they haven't actually gone and said, and I've watched a lot of the promos for it, whether it be TLC, Raw, or SmackDown, and they've said 5 weeks from Sunday, Royal Rumble, but they haven't said from the Thunderdome, from Tropicana Field, any of that kind of stuff. And let's hope that in the next 5 weeks, something miraculous happens where there are somebody there and or things just get better in general. Because the Royal Rumble, that is one of the harder pay-per-views to do in a pandemic like this. You got a lot of people. That is where you have one of the thickest rosters in one night because you got 30 men, you got 30 women, and then you got some other matches going on. And more importantly than just 30 men, 30 women, but you have a mix. You want some NXT people in there. You want some returns in there from people who aren't involved in WWE right now. So that's where it's really difficult, because you want to have more involvement. And it kind of breaks into the results of the Slammy Awards that came out this past week. Nothing too crazy, but there were some awards in which they didn't advertise that we talked about last week. And the reason they didn't advertise them because they're absolute garbage awards, and it goes into something I was just saying about like celebrity involvement. And they had a Celebrity of the Year award, and no shocker, it went to Rob Gronkowski. Now, Brandon, can I actually ask you this question? If it didn't go to Rob Gronkowski, could you even name one celebrity or one person who wasn't involved, who isn't a WWE superstar, who had any involvement in WWE this year?
Nope, nobody.
So that's why that is the dumbest award right there, because of that fact alone. Celebrity of the Year. What other celebrity was there this year?
Okay, let me argue. I thought of something, but again, it'd be in the NXT level. It'd be a Pat McAfee. But talking main roster, then yes, Gronkowski's the only one. I was just thinking about that. The wheels were just turning there for a second. So yes, WWE on the Raw and SmackDown, the main two shows. Yes, Gronkowski would be the name. If you included NXT, which I don't think they did, I didn't see any NXT winners or anybody being nominated from NXT. So that tells me Pat McAfee doesn't qualify.
Yeah, on the main roster, Rob Gronkowski is the only person that had any sort of involvement. Now, if WrestleMania would have taken place normally, maybe there would have been somebody else involved. Obviously, we saw with last year's WrestleMania, you had Colin Jost and Michael Che from Saturday Night Live. Who would have known come SummerSlam around what would have happened? Without a pandemic, who even knows if Rob Gronkowski would have decided to retake up the football, and he might have earned the Celebrity of the Year remark because he might have really taken a Pat McAfee approach to professional wrestling. We'll never know, and it goes in hand with the Royal Rumble. We're really hoping that some things can change so that we can have a authentic Royal Rumble, which has that mix of celebrity to an extent with old wrestlers, new wrestlers, returning wrestlers, that kind of thing. And before we move on to the rest of this Slammy, I kind of think, do you think WWE ruined the fact that Seth Rollins is going to come back next week for SmackDown on the New Year's Day episode? Or do you think he should have maybe been a Royal Rumble surprise?
I think he should have been a Royal Rumble surprise, especially because of, again, being in the pandemic. It's going to be hard to bring in some outside wrestlers that are outside, competitors that are not in the business currently, because the point of bringing those people back are for one reason and one reason only: to get the pop, to get the the huge pop when their music hits, like a John Cena's music hits, and the whole roof comes off. You don't get that with the Thunderdome. You can hear it a little bit with the background microphone. You can hear them on Skype or Zoom, whatever. But it's not the same as having a live audience. So I think having somebody come back like a Seth Rollins, who hasn't really been gone that long anyways, having him come back would be kind of a cool way to bring him back. I'm not saying he'd win the match or the Royal Rumble match, but he could definitely be there in the end. So for me, bringing it back is not a good idea.
You got to save what you can because you don't know who you're going to be able to have come Royal Rumble time. You don't know for sure. Seth Rollins might be the biggest thing you could probably get because a lot of other people might be in quarantine. They might be on travel restrictions. They might not be able to make it to the Royal Rumble. So you might have to rely on some old reliables, like a Seth Rollins or a Becky Lynch in the Women's Royal Rumble or something. You might only have those as your surprises. You might not be able to get the MVPs and the edges this year because, like I said, they got tons of stuff going on when it comes to this illness. You don't want to get your family sick, especially some of these people. I mean, wrestling's one of those weird sports. A lot of these guys are up there in age, so maybe they're not exactly the kind of people who are traveling around. One person actually who was just in an interview I was reading recently up there in age, Charlie Haas. He says he is not against making some sort of return to WWE or AEW. Now, he says it's probably highly unlikely because of his age, but he'd listen to calls if either of them wanted to bring him in. So maybe a one-night-only reunion of Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas. But either way, it's things like that show these guys are up there in age. They don't really have the abilities like they once did. Save any sort of surprises you can get right now. Save them because you don't want to bank on something else. You don't want to bank on a big surprise and get a cancellation at the last minute.
I don't know if this is. I don't know how you're gonna. I don't know what you would consider this being a surprise, a good surprise or a bad surprise. What about having Adam Pearce? You know how they had JBL as the commentator one year in the Royal Rumble? Why not have WWE official Adam Pearce in the Royal Rumble? That'd be kind of a cheesy way to do it. And here's the thing. Are you expecting Adam Pearce to get a huge pop from the fans? No, but it'd be an interesting surprise because he's been around the ring. And guess what? He was a former NWA champion, so the guy can wrestle.
Yes. I don't know, though, if it would have, that would be fine, but it wouldn't have the effect of an Edge. It wouldn't have the effect of an MVP.
Absolutely.
The effect of a Trish Stratus. Wouldn't have the effect of a Lita, that kind of thing.
No.
That's all I'm saying. The whole, the Women's Royal Rumble, and to be honest with you, the Women's Royal Rumble is the one who probably relies the most on getting in the Trish Stratuses, the Litas, the Victorias, the Kelly Kellys of the world. They're the ones who normally rely on that the most. So
I'm going to go on a limb. Women's Royal Rumble, you will see the Bella Twins at Royal Rumble.
All right. You heard it here first. Before we even hit the new year, let's just get rid of some of the Slammy Award winners. As we saw, Drew McIntyre wins both male and Superstar of the Year. Sasha Banks, Female of the Year. The Street Profits, rightfully so, won the Tag Team of the Year. The Match of the Year in WWE was the Boneyard match at WrestleMania 36. The Rivalry was Edge versus Randy Orton, another one I disagree with.
Yeah. Return
of the Year went to Edge. Moment of the Year went to The Undertaker's Final Farewell. I guess you could take that one. Breakout Stars of the Year went to Street Profits. Ring Gear of the Year, The New Day. Again, hard to disagree. Another one where they didn't really have any competition. Musical Performance of the Year went to Elias, doing his new album or parts of it on October the 19th, Raw. Social Media Superstar of the Year went to Bayley. Now, I don't really know how they came to that conclusion. Trash Talk of the Year went to Lacey Evans and the Hurt Business. Another one without any competition at all, probably the worst one. Documentary of the Year. Documentary of the Year. What was that? The Last Ride Undertaker? That would be like ESPN saying, what do you think their documentary of the year was? I don't know. The one in which every single person on earth watched versus there was no second. I mean, yes, WWE comes out with a lot of great documentaries, and they did. But there was nothing else that they promoted or was watched as heavily as The Last Ride, period. And probably never will be. That'll be not just the documentary of the year, but probably the greatest documentary or the most important documentary that they will probably ever produce, period. I have a feeling next year the Documentary of the Year award might actually be kind of interesting because you won't have just a clear-cut winner. You'll actually have a bunch of different episodes of Icon or different episodes of This Day in WWE. But that was obviously a clear winner there without any competition. Double Cross of the Year went to Bayley attacking Sasha Banks on the September 4th episode of SmackDown. Referee of the Year went to Charles Robinson. And the most creative pin of the year went to Drew Gulak in a janitor's outfit on Monday Night Raw, October the 5th. But to be fair, those were WWE's picks. I actually picked up what a lot of people through the internet, some more reputable sites, picked as wrestling matches of the year. And see maybe if you agree with me here, we got AEW's Revolution as the #1 match of the year, AEW Revolution, February the 29th. Adam Page, Kenny Omega against the Young Bucks in a tag team match. That is what some hardened wrestling fans, or at least at like Fight database, are saying is the wrestling match of the year. Second place goes to the two second place, second and third, go to day one nights of Wrestle Kingdom, and we're coming upon Wrestle Kingdom next week. Okada versus Ibushi and Takashi versus Ospreay. They both pretty much tied for second and third of the year. Full Gear 2020. This was one in front of no fans. Matt Jackson and Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks, against FTR. That is what many say is the fourth best match of the year.
Disagree.
Brandon, you disagreeing there? Are you disagreeing that the Young Bucks are getting so much love here at the top of the?
Yeah, it's like, dude, it's like, what do you? I mean, are you paying Meltzer and all these other like wrestling database, nerds or geeks, whatever you want to call them? Come on, the Young Bucks are good, but there are some NXT matches that I would put way ahead of that Young Bucks FTR match. And a lot of places that I use reputably put that as like a B- kind of match because it wasn't that great. It was an okay match. I mean, if it was anybody else, it'd be a pretty good match, but you expect more from the Bucks and FTR. So for me, no, it's not. It's not even in my top 10. Come on.
We'll skip over two more New Japan matches that happened from the G1 Climax that both involved Okada and Ibushi. And we'll move over to Walter versus Dragunov for that NXT UK episode for the championship that aired.
That wasn't that. We agreed. We talked about it on the show. We talked about it for like 10, 15 seconds because it was that great of a match.
Yeah, well, probably the best, I guess, NXT UK match of the year for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you there, yes.
AEW Dynamite on September 16th. This was the one we talked about, the only 5-star match of the year that Dave Meltzer gave. Apparently, so maybe he puts this as the #1 match, but these guys put this at about the #8 match, and that was Trent and Chuck Taylor versus Ortiz and Santana in that street brawl that they had, the one out in the parking garage.
Good match.
Like I said, we both agreed at the time, a little overrated. Not saying it wasn't a good match, not a great way to end Dynamite, but one of the best matches of the year. I'm not too sure. Kenny Omega in his AAA match down in Mexico on December the 12th versus Laredo Kid pulled in a 5-star match because Kenny Omega can't do any wrong wherever he goes. And the first match, I think this shows up about 13th on the list. The first match that is on the list that is not AEW or New Japan is the NXT War Games match that we just saw a few weeks ago with Roderick Strong, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly, Adam Cole versus McAfee, Oney Lorcan, Danny Burch, and Pete Dunne. That, according to Pro Wrestling Database, is the #1, I guess, NXT/WWE match of the year in their eyes.
Disagree.
And the second best one that they have NXT-wise that actually ends the bottom of the list, 2 matches from NXT TakeOver Portland, Ciampa versus Cole, and Matt Riddle and Pete Dunne versus Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly. They end out the list of this top 20 list of top matches of the year.
All right. Where the heck is Pete Dunne and Kyle O'Reilly? Where is that? Where is that match? I mean, that we just saw. I was talking about that last week?
Yeah. Well, I only have that. I only have the top 20 in front of me. It's not there.
That's the best match of the year. I mean, I will say this. I haven't seen all the New Japan wrestling matches. I'm being honest here, but I do know that the names you mentioned, like Will Ospreay, for example, those guys always put on shows. They'd be megastars here in the U.S. if they came over here, which hopefully they will soon. So I can't dispute that because New Japan, the wrestling over there is fantastic. We've watched Wrestle Kingdoms, over the last couple of years. Those are great matches. So I will not argue it because I haven't seen all those matches. But you're going to tell me a Pete Dunne, Kyle O'Reilly match from literally last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was absolutely not one of the best matches of the year. That to me is wrong. That is absolutely wrong. I think Pete Dunne and Kyle O'Reilly are 2 of the best pure wrestlers in the business right now. That's how good those guys are.
Kind of finishing things out, Wrestle Kingdom is coming up again next week. Going to kick off 2021, hopefully in front of fans. I've noticed that Japan, I think, has had a few fans there. I don't exactly know how many fans they'll have at the Tokyo Dome. That'll be curious right there. Do you think that Wrestle Kingdom, while it did the 2-night experiment last year, are you for them going back to 1 night? I think the 2-night thing is kind of a little ridiculous, to be honest with you, especially in the current climate we're in. I think they should definitely go back to 1 night. And, one thing is we've watched a lot of New Japan Wrestling the last couple of years, or at least Wrestle Kingdom and some other shows. I went to the one right before WrestleMania, the Super Card of Honor with Ring of Honor they had. And one thing I will say about New Japan Wrestling as somebody who's been watching it now for about 3 or 4 years is they are, and this year's very much included, Wrestle Kingdom is very heavy on Okada, Ibushi, Will Ospreay, and Switchblade Jay White. Those 4 people seem to be in the main event every single year. Now, I'm not saying they're not good wrestlers, but it's WWE obviously has faces of the companies without a doubt. There's no doubt about that. But looking into this year's Wrestle Kingdom card, it seems like, again, they kind of just shuffle the matches you have from the year before when it comes to the main event. And instead of like Hakata versus Ibushi this year, it's Ibushi versus Will Ospreay and Okada versus White. And you kind of just, like I said, shuffle the names so it's not the exact same matches as last year. Instead of Kenny Omega, and because this year you don't have Kenny Omega and you don't have Chris Jericho. There's rumors you might have Jon Moxley, but as of right now you don't. So you don't have those 3 guys. Do you think New Japan should do something different? I know we're not the hardened base to really make that decision because we're not their number 1 fan base, I guess is to say. But I would actually like to see, because these guys got me into New Japan Wrestling, but I guess my thing is, what else you got? And obviously a lot of the other people put on a good show too. Yeah. But it's weird that I don't watch New Japan Wrestling for a whole year, and when I turn it back on at Wrestle Kingdom every single year, it shows that I really didn't need to watch it for a whole year, because it's the same people with the same belts going for the championship, and there aren't any new stars or anything that I really missed out on. What do you think about that, Brandon?
Yeah, I agree with you 110%, man. I mean, that is the best analysis you can give on New Japan Wrestling at this point, because you're right. They shuffle the deck. And yes, here's the thing. If it ain't broke, you don't fix it. You use the best 4 wrestlers you got. You put them in the main event. You shuffle the deck. Hey, it works. But here's the thing. What's going to happen when those four wrestlers, can't do it anymore? What are you going to do? What's going to be your main event for the future? So what my issue with New Japan is, and here's the thing, I'm not the authority on New Japan Wrestling because I don't watch enough of it to be the authority. But from everything that I've been able to watch and able to see, I don't see them developing some other young stars like they should. They're using the same handful of wrestlers that are always in the main event. So for me, it's like, like you said, show them what you got. What else we got? Because we got the 4. We know they're good. Where the hell is the rest of the crew? Like, we need to see some other talent, which I know they got talent over there, because look how much talent has come from Japan that's flooded our wrestling mats here in the U.S., in WWE, AEW, Ring of Honor, you name it, Impact, all these different promotions. There's a lot of great wrestling over there. I mean, there's a lot of great wrestling in Mexico. But here's the thing. You got to develop more stars, because here's the thing. WWE and AEW could be looking at Wrestle Kingdom and saying, why aren't we trying to get those guys to come over here? Let's pay them top dollar, and let's see if they can develop some more talent, because if you take the top 4 superstars away from New Japan, they're going to be in a whole hell of a lot of trouble, and AEW and WWE are going to be kicking some ass. That's just my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, too. You lost Kenny Omega. Like, the shuffling becomes less and less, because New Japan Wrestling this year, it looks like Wrestle Kingdom last year, just minus Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, Jon Moxley, So you had those guys in, and then those guys obviously come over here. You have less of them. You obviously used to have some more Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes doesn't obviously compete there anymore. Young Bucks don't compete there anymore. So the fact that you're getting there thinner, now they obviously have 2 nights worth of wrestling, so it's not that they don't have the talent. They obviously are putting on the show. But the issue is that those guys that I saw last year kick off the show in the Royal Rumble that kicks off Wrestle Kingdom are not in the main event this year. They're in the Royal Rumble or the Battle Royal match that kicks it off again this year. You need to maybe move some of those guys into the main event picture. I need to turn it on and go, who's this guy? I didn't see this guy last year. Instead it's going to be, Ibushi, Okada, Tanahashi, Jay White, Will Ospreay. Now, Will Ospreay, I'll say he was more of a mid-carder a couple years ago, kind of moving into the main scene there. But when it comes to Okada, again, he's been the face of the place for a couple of years, and Naoto, he's been the face of the place. Those two guys just seem to keep going at it, over and over and over again. I just want to see some new guys, maybe some new American guys too, because that I think is what put Wrestle Kingdom on the map. To be honest with you, while the Japanese wrestling is great, and those guys are probably the best, what I think put Wrestle Kingdom on the map, at least for kind of the more casual fan like me a couple of years ago, was the jux of seeing the top American guy versus the top Japanese guy. Because, again, I don't want to toot America's horn too much, but, when it comes to popularity and pop culture, kind of everything comes through America. Japan, even everything that they love, comes through America. So having that American relatability in Wrestle Kingdom is what helps make it such a good show. When you had Jericho versus, Naoto or Ibushi or any of these people, that's what helped Wrestle Kingdom. You had the Cody Rhodes versus, you had the America versus the Japan kind of aspect. You had the real good American wrestler, the real good Japanese wrestler going at it. And Jay White and Will Ospreay, they kind of still give that a little bit. Jay White, being, who he is, and Ospreay being English, give that kind of element. But I think, maybe even, it's time for New Japan. There seems to be the only one not rating talent. It's funny that Impact Wrestling, AEW, and WWE are getting guys over from Japan. Why aren't they getting some guys over from Impact? Maybe, maybe it's time for EC3. Bring him over to New Japan. Put him in the mix with the Okadas. Sammy Callahan. Some of these guys, maybe it's time for them to move from Impact over to New Japan. Some of the guys, the Nick Aldis's of the world from NWA or the Eli Drakes. I think it's time for New Japan to start doing reverse and stop letting everyone go to AEW and Impact and WWE and start bringing some guys over themselves. And maybe not just for like the one night only, like the Jericho thing, but bring them over, legitimately, because I can't imagine how popular New Japan is. I don't know the pay structure, but is it really, would EC3 really be making more money in Impact than he would in New Japan Wrestling? I mean, I'm not the one to say, but I don't see how you could be as big as a company as you are, somebody who comes to America and sells out Madison Square Garden, and not be able to, acquire some more talent yourself to kind of get that American audience in. And maybe, like I said, bring in an EC3 or that kind of thing. And WWE, obviously, they've got faces of the companies too, but they do shuffle the deck. Obviously, Drew McIntyre being in the main event of this year's WrestleMania. If you watched the WrestleMania last year, the year before, he was nowhere near it. I don't even know if he was on the cards. That kind of thing. This year, the two main event matches that you have that lead into the two main event matches on night 2 are all people that, even if you just watched the main events of New Japan Wrestling in the past, you're going to recognize. Like I said, there isn't the Tonga Kid. He's on the card. He's been on the card, but he's not all of a sudden now like a Jey Uso, went from a tag team to a superstar singles competitor. He's still in the tag team. So you still got people like that. I think New Japan Wrestling just needs to not evolve their talent. They have the talent. They just need to do what WWE did this year with Jey Uso and take him from, we're sick and tired of just seeing him in the low card and being a tag team, making him a singles competitor. WWE did that with Edge and Christian. They did that with the Hardy Boys. Impact Wrestling unsuccessfully kind of did that with the Dudley Boys. You take these guys, and you made them singles competitors. And you didn't just let Edge and Christian kick off every show and just be a great tag team and just be the prelims for every show. You made Edge a Hall of Fame singles competitor. You made Jeff Hardy a Hall of Fame singles competitor. So I think New Japan Wrestling should do some of that stuff in the sense of when a casual fan turns on Wrestle Kingdom, we get to not just see the same faces, but maybe we are seeing their version of the Jey Uso, like I said, the Tonga Kid, moving into a singles action in a main event picture, unsuspectingly winning the belt, that kind of thing, starting these new rivalries. Because, again, I didn't watch it for a whole year, but I'm looking at what happened at the G1 Climax. I'm looking at what happened at some of these other events, and it just seems Okada versus Ibushi, Ibushi versus Naoto versus Okada, that kind of stuff. But on great matches, but again, wrestling is part storyline too. So if you just have some of the same stuff over again, the storyline gets old, the matches get old.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you gotta again, you can't keep recycling. You gotta. I think you're right. New Japan needs to bring some American talent over. Not that they don't have talent in Japan, but to get some American audience like us. Maybe we tune in more if we see somebody we've been a fan of over here going over there. So I mean it.
And we did, and that's what we did. We tuned in. What's the first time we tuned in? When we knew Jericho was going over there.
Exactly.
And we knew Cody Rhodes was over there. And we knew the Young Bucks were, so they've lost all those guys. So it's time for them to start reloading, getting the new wave of the American that needs to reinvent themselves. I mean, the new Drew McIntyres of the world. How did Drew McIntyre get where he is? Did the reinventing thing. Cody Rhodes did the reinventing thing. They all did that. So I think it's time that maybe, AJ Styles can even say he did that. He left Impact Wrestling, went to New Japan Wrestling, made himself not a bigger name, but, really solidified his name by going to New Japan before he went to WWE. The Good Brothers, great example right there. They did the same. So Finn Balor. So I think it's time for them to get some more of those guys over to New Japan. Some of these guys that are EC3s, the guys that need to reinvent themselves. Sounds kind of dumb, but I'll end the show here with somebody. One person that WWE hasn't been mentioning in their creative the last couple of weeks, and they backstage has said that they've kind of ignored this person because of all the controversy going on with his wife, Aleister Black. They have kind of blacklisted him from WWE. Now, I don't know if that's a permanent thing, but with everything going on, I heard his name has just pretty much stopped being mentioned. So if for some reason he finds himself out of a job or needing to, reinvent himself, I think, going over to New Japan, I think that would be better than AEW. Everyone just can't go to AEW. Yeah. I think somewhere like New Japan would be better for an Aleister Black than an AEW in my eyes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think an Aleister Black, because of what's going on, he's been kind of, like you said, blacklisted or blackballed, I guess. Japan would be a good thing for him to retool and maybe get a break from WWE, and maybe they can let things kind of go under the bridge, so to speak. A couple of years he comes back to WWE if he decides to. You're right. You can't just send everybody to AEW. That is 100% fact. Just because you're a big name in WWE or you were a good name, or not maybe a big name but just a good name in WWE, and you're not being used, doesn't mean you automatically go to AEW. I think that kind of ruins the surprises because, okay, well, he's gone. He's going to AEW. I would like to see what happens with Aleister Black. If he does for some reason go to Japan, if that happens, that's cool because I'll tune in. I'll follow him because I'm a big fan of Aleister Black. I think he's done a lot of great things in the business, but I do feel bad that because of what his wife did, now he's getting into trouble, so to speak. And here's the thing: Lana had a nice little run until her injury, and we know how that whole thing played out with Rusev, now known as Miro. So, I mean, why are they doing this to Black if Lana's been okay the entire time, just about?
Well, we will see when we talk to you in 2 weeks into the new year. We'll break down what happened at Wrestle Kingdom, see if Jon Moxley did get involved. He is somebody like a Kenny Omega who has kind of a leash to be able to go to other places. So we'll see if they have any involvement at Wrestle Kingdom. We'll see what happened on Raw Legends Night. Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan in the same ring. Maybe we'll see them wrestle in WWE. Who knows? With the ratings slumping on Monday Night Raw right now, anything is possible. But either way, we'll talk Raw Legends Night, we'll talk Wrestle Kingdom, and the road to the Royal Rumble, which is in turn the road to WrestleMania, kicks off. It'll be January by the time we talk to you again. For Brandon Clements, for myself, Jared Wicks, follow the show at Heel to Face on Twitter. We'll talk to you next time.